Don't call me Junior.
Look what you did! You can't believe what you did! You know, sharing your adventures is an interesting experience.
It's time to let Old Painless out the bag. Payback time. Welcome to Predator Minute, the podcast that analyzes the 1987 action sci-fi horror classic Predator 1 minute at a time. I'm John Zabriskie.
And I'm Jeff Glover.
And with us today, we have another Zabriskie. I don't know if you can believe it, but there are more of us out there. Joining us today as our very special guest is my dad, Bill Zabriskie.
And hello, and great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Yes, thank you.
We look forward to your expertise, which we will make it to a little bit later. But
it's an honor to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. We're talking minute 19 today on Predator Minute. Minute 19 opens with Billy telling Dutch, hell, it's like they just disappeared, and ends with the team maneuvering through the thick jungle. And there's quite a lot that happens in this minute. We see a couple of the firsts in terms of iconic imagery from this movie, and I'm super excited to talk about both of them, even though I'm going to be honest right now and up front, I completely don't understand how they make the thermal imaging work, but that's the whole reason I asked my dad on, because he has that experience.
I'm super excited to hear about that because it's one of the best parts of the film. Yeah. Well,
so hope you're excited to talk about it, Dad. But yeah, and what we usually do is we just kind of run through the minute. Jeff, you want to start us off?
Yeah, we should probably start at the beginning when Billy and Dutch are finishing up their conversation, right? All right. Mm-hmm. So Dutch says Billy says hell, it's like they just disappeared.
Hell, it's like they just disappeared.
Dutch tells Billy to stick with the guerrilla trail.
Stick with the guerrilla trail.
And they're going to go off and get the hostages, and tells the rest of the team, we move, 5 meter spread, no sound.
Let's get the hostages. We move, 5 meter spread, no sound.
I'll fix it in post.
So really in the first few seconds of this minute, we're just finishing up the conversation that we left off on in the last minute, which we talked about in quite a bit of detail. But we get here just a little closure. We find out Dutch is telling Billy to stick to the trail, and he tells them to move out. We're going to spread 5 meter spread, no sound, and they're off.
Yeah. And the note I made here was a callback to when he was kind of comforting Panchito a little bit, when he was saying like, yeah, trying to forget Afghanistan. And Arnold, gives him the kind of buddy, like, yeah, like we're just on to the next thing. We survived that, right? And then here at the very beginning, where he's wrapping up his conversation with Billy, after watching this a few times this minute, I'm totally seeing Arnold flex his leadership muscles, or Dutch. I guess they're one and the same in this movie. And he gives Billy this kind of shoulder nudge and says, hey, let's get the hostages. Kind of like, hey, forget about what happened back there on, 3rd and long. Like, let's go for the touchdown. Let's go for the Hail Mary here. Let's get after, the real mission here. Let's get after them. Forget about them. And to me, I think that really speaks to Dutch knowing Billy is kind of like this guy who maybe can just kind of stick to something, or like, not be able to move on very well.
He's trying to get him to move past, which is funny because he probably just saw the most horrific thing he's ever seen in his entire life. And Arnold's like, let's move along here, spread out, let's go.
Just stay focused. So
I have a question about this from the leadership perspective. Many times I think in the modern world, when we're presented with choices, we spend a lot of time analyzing and talking to stakeholders and building up a consensus on how to proceed. And that isn't what happens here.
No.
So, are there areas in your life where this is more of the leadership style?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, because Jeff and I are both teachers. So I think it really depends on your own philosophy. Do I want a principal who's just really good with saying, here's what everybody's going to do, here's the required training or videos or whatnot, and you just do them by this date? I think for a lot of people that I work with, that is really like the model that works for us. It's just kind of being told as opposed to kind of finding your own way.
Yeah, I
Jeff,
appreciate a boss, a principal in our case, or a boss that will just make decisions. Sometimes you want the decisions to be put up to the group because it makes sense for the group to come to a consensus about something. Sometimes you just want the leadership to make a decision, disseminate that decision, and just stand by it, because that's what good leadership is sometimes, and some people aren't going to be happy. Some people will be happy, but in the end, sometimes a decision just needs to be made. So, Arnold's kind of doing that here. He's kind of like, well, here's what's going to happen. We're just going to keep on moving forward. We have a job to do. We have hostages to find. And I'm just going to tell you guys to keep on moving forward. And we're not going to sit here and dwell on the horrific flayed bodies that are hanging from the trees. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it's a focus on the mission and the objective, and it never leaves his mind. And given a choice here, he just says the objective hasn't changed. Let's go.
Right. We're not going to sit here and dwell. That's the word I was looking for. We're not going to sit here and dwell on the situation. Although at the same time, Arnold is clearly all for letting his team just bring whatever equipment they want to, whatever weapons, whatever headwear. We'll talk about that in a minute. But what's your take, Dad, on Billy, played by Sonny Landham, who is from Kentucky? Hey, a fellow bluegrass native, just like yourself.
Well, I wanted to explore more something you mentioned in a previous podcast, that Billy came with a bodyguard, not to protect Billy, but to protect people from Billy.
So great.
Yes.
I'm going to start doing that in my personal life.
The men in this movie are huge, and apparently the bodyguard was essentially the biggest guy in camp.
Yeah.
So why did people need protecting from him?
That's a good question. I think I think it was Aaron way back in minute 4 or 5 was mentioning how Billy would go out with the group pre-bodyguard days, and they'd be like in the discotheque there in Mexico, and Billy would just be out of control, like fighting people in the bar and like biting people on the leg on the dance floor.
Wow.
Totally nuts stuff. So
breaking chairs over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then at that point, it's like, well, we can either fire him or you can keep him, but with this insurance liability or whatever. I don't know, this condition. Yeah. So you like that story. That's good. All right.
Yeah. I like the story, and I like the character. He's the Native American,
half Italian.
I don't know. It's almost a,
yeah. Right, he's half Italian,
but it's almost
his mom's side.
Yeah. Yeah. Despite the typecasting, I just think he's
so good.
He's terrific in the role.
Yeah. It's something else we talked about. Gosh, I'm totally blanking what we talked about. But like originally, his character was supposed to be this Central American Indian who would speak in broken English, very Tonto-like lines, like "many men that way." Versus here, it's just like he just sounds like a good old boy. As soon as he opens his mouth, he's like a Southern gentleman, just out and about with his buddies out, with in the jungle. But yeah, I tend to really appreciate Billy and his fear, just his ongoing motif of being scared
he is
and his fear.
Yeah, he is in a lot of ways being us, the audience, right? He's asking questions. He's scared. He's trying to make the best logical decision in this sort of illogical situation. And so a lot of us that are, as the audience watching the movie, you're thinking about what you would do in that situation. And I think Billy really kind of plays into that.
Yeah.
Well, and they're clearly using him to bring the premonition to the audience. It's the music, it's the close confines of the jungle, and his premonitions bring that fear out earlier perhaps than it would have come out otherwise.
All right, so we get past the did you have anything else to add about that conversation? Okay, so around 14 seconds into the minute here, we get a quick shot of Mac and Blain, and they tell us Mac tells us, Mac, that it's time. We have to do our own drops because we don't have the drops ready this time. Mac! Yeah. Mac tells Blain that, quote,
Mac.
"It's time to let Old Painless out of the bag."
It's time to let Old Painless out the bag.
So this is when we get our first like real glimpse or real foreshadowing that the minigun is going to come out. Yeah. And so we get it's time to let Old Painless out of the bag, and then we get the great line. He says, "Payback time."
Payback time.
After he removes it from the duffel, he pulls it out. Says, "Payback time." And we get a nice shot of the minigun. Did you want to talk a little bit about that minigun, John?
Yeah. Oh my God, do I? So you talk about the things that this movie's known for. It's the iconic lines. It's the Predator in all its glory with the thermal vision, the active camouflage, the variety of weapons. You talk about the A-team scene in the middle where they're blowing up the guerrilla camp, just blowing it to hell. And all these things. But one of the mainstays for me is always the minigun.
It's what you always remember about this movie, right? Like if you haven't seen the movie in 20 years, let's say, someone asks you about it, like, what do you remember? You remember Jesse Ventura firing the shit out of that thing into the jungle.
Yeah, no, not only Jesse, but I mean, it's all Mac at that point where he's just the wide shot and behind him, and he's just
That's right.
It looks like he just mowed the jungle down with what Jesse Ventura calls like firing a chainsaw. But yeah, I made a whole list of I listed some of the iconic movie weapons that I could think of, and I could find online what people put in their lists. And this one stands out to me. But I was wondering, what do you guys think of as iconic movie weapons? You think like, oh, this is definitely from a certain movie franchise.
Talked about this as being the minigun is sort of like its own little character, right? Because like we were saying, it's something you always remember. And you
Yep. I have a guess what yours is, Jeff.
Well, you know me, I'm always lean towards the horror side of things. And you put a couple of these in your list, but Jason's machete, Freddy's glove, but I from my favorite of all of them would probably be Bruce Campbell's chainsaw hand. Yeah. Ash from,
that's exactly what I thought.
Evil Dead and the Evil Dead series. It's so iconic because it's so ridiculous. And so much fun. So that's one of my favorites.
What about you, Dad? Something?
Well, I'll go old
generation,
school.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'll go old school.
Yeah, old school.
Yeah, so from that perspective, it's the Walther PPK that James Bond carried in the Sean Connery days. Mm-hmm. Then bringing it up into the era of this movie, it would be Crocodile Dundee. You call that a knife? That's a knife.
That's not a knife. This is a knife. Go ahead. Do you want to talk more about the Walter PPK or the?
No, that's I'll go with that.
Well, I like that, man. I love these references because
you had a really good list here, John. If you don't mind me listing some of them, do you mind if I kind of talk about a few of these?
Oh, sure. I'll go ahead and say my number one is the lightsaber, being the Star Wars fan. I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt right now. It says Yavin 4, but that's just an obvious one.
As I was reading the list, I loved going through it and thinking about how iconic these different weapons were to these particular movies or franchises. Like you put Indy's whip in there, which of course is a good one. But there were some that I would not I wouldn't necessarily have thought of right away, but like the floating spheres from Phantasm. That's awesome. Yeah. And RoboCop's his like automatic pistol that sort of fires differently than any other gun in the history of guns. And you also included Anton Sugar's bolt gun, from No Country for Old Men. That is such an iconic weapon.
No Country for Old Men,
because it's so terrifying. It is as if he's executing cattle, right?
Just unsuspecting cattle. Like, what's going on?
So that was really good. Oh yeah, Terminator 2, the sawed-off shotgun, Dirty Harry's 44 Magnum, the phasers in Star Trek.
Holy hand grenade.
Yeah, I think
Python.
The machine gun is much closer to the holy hand grenade, and its total ridiculousness. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what is it doing in this environment in this movie? But then it just blends right in, I think, as its own character, like I said, because it's the different characters can access it. It's just, it has its own screen time. It has its own proper noun.
And it's also a little out of reality, right? Like RoboCop's gun didn't really make sense, really. Yeah. And so the minigun, the way they use it in the movie is not how you could actually use it in real life, correct?
I mean, in theory, yes, but like in practical combat situation, no way. And that's what everybody comments on the IMDb for firearms and on the different commentaries. Like Shane Black is just laughing like this is ludicrous, and John McTiernan on the commentary is stating how you'd be just like up to your waist in shells after about a minute firing. Just producing
like the bouncy
6,000 spent shells in
Chuck E.
1
Cheese
at its full speed,
filled up with machine gun shells.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've seen some statistics on this. Like he would have to have 1,000 pounds worth of bullets to be able to fire it for as long as he did, or whatever. Yeah. And it's an extremely heavy gun too, right? Like normally it would be mounted on a vehicle of some sort, probably.
Yeah, it's part of it's the heaviness of it, but also a huge part of it that's not explored as often in people's heads is the fact that any kind of automatic weapon or any kind of weapon that when it's fired, it gives a kick and it does jerk up. Smaller machine guns, you can kind of control by shooting in short bursts, but something like this, if you hold it down for just a few seconds, that thing is going to be flying up in the air. That's the big reason why it's normally mounted. If you're firing live rounds out of this, it's going to hit 90 degrees in a hurry, and then all around it's going to be firing. But because it's firing blanks in the movie, they didn't have that same kick, and so it's not requiring as much steadiness that amount would provide in a helicopter.
So should there be like an alternate cut of this movie where he starts firing it and just immediately flies backwards? Just disappears into the jungle,
straight up into there. Just arc of right. The predator just goes, oh man, like I was going to have some fun with those guys, but they're all so
perhaps neat. What he should have brought was a BFG 9000.
Oh
yes, from the Doom series. Yeah, BFG. Well, I mean, originally in the script, it is just the M60 that they're calling Old Painless. In the 1985 original script, it definitely doesn't have that same flair. And John McTiernan came across it when looking through the armory for gun props and saying, "Oh, this is going to be awesome." Even and so it just to underscore its importance, it is am I using that term correctly? To highlight its importance, I'll say. It is the first time this is being held, the minigun on camera,
right? As
a handheld. For as ridiculous as it is, it did have a first time, and it's here. And you mentioned T2, Jeff, with the sawed-off shotgun. Well, the fun fact, one of the many fun facts I have for the minigun is that the same one in T2, or the one that Arnold is using in T2, is this exact one. It's this exact gun. Yep. What the big change they made was cutting off the M60 handguard on the bottom where Jesse's holding it, where Mac is holding it later. Mac! Instead, they put these chainsaw grip over it. So if you can imagine Arnold firing out of the Cyberdyne building, he's holding it like you would a chainsaw, and it's very appropriate that Jesse Ventura likens firing this as holding a chainsaw. And in fact, like if you think about the logistics of where he has to hold it under it, that's a terrible way to hold this thing, like on top of everything else being ridiculous, because you slip and like your hand this thing is falling on your hand. This hot rotating metal, 6 barrels of fun just landing right on your hand. It would be like a chainsaw landing on your hand.
It'd be like a super hot chainsaw that just came out of the oven landing on your hand.
Then you'd have Bruce's chainsaw hand from the Evil Dead series. So
yeah, well, there you go. Then you just remove your dead hand and replace it with the minigun.
And McTiernan did note that in the film, during the filming, there were essentially no injuries, and he was very concerned about injuries from the dummy bullets, the blanks. Yeah, because
right.
The sound, the percussive sound, and the flash can blind you or deafen you. And if he had lost control of the gun while he was firing those blanks and had spun around and pointed it at someone, just the noise and the light from the blanks could have done serious damage.
Right. I think it was all remotely operated, if I remember, like as in it's firing on, there's someone on slightly behind Jesse and Mac when it's being fired. But at the same time, it's like so quick that, right, it is this real danger, even though it's full of blanks. So man, that's part of the reason.
Yeah.
It hasn't been held on camera until now.
All right. Well, should we get to second 27 here?
We should. This is like we're finally meeting our last.
We've been building up to.
Yeah, I want to say our next to last major character of the movie after the Squad and Old Painless. Now we're finally seeing something as the drums take over, those same sweet drums that we've been talking about over and over and over. Yes, we love the drums. Drums, please. And it does this, one of the super sweet, one of these really neat zooms where it's zooming into the jungle and you're going like, wait, hold on, why is it zooming into the jungle just now? Like, what's going on? This is the first time that the drums are actually leading us into something, leading us into like what the drums, I believe, are representing, right? It's just like this real danger, this real thing that they can be affected by in the jungle. And that would be something that's watching them with a different kind of vision, an altered vision is how they reference it in the script. But if you want to talk about that, one of you guys, just we're seeing the cool killer POV, but a very unique killer perspective.
Yeah. So, go ahead, Bill.
Go ahead.
No, I'm going to please go, Jeff.
Oh, I just wanted to comment. I like what you were talking about, John, with the zoom into the jungle there, because up until this point, the camera has been moving relatively slowly, right? We get a lot of static shots. We get some pans left and right. And then, with these drums start up and we get this zoom into the jungle, and it kind of changes the feeling immediately when you're watching the movie. And then all of a sudden, at about 32, 33 seconds into this minute, we get the shift into the discolored, what we now know is the heat vision.
Yeah, my screen turns blue for some crazy reason.
Mine too.
Yeah, and I see some kind of pink and orange, green shapes shifting through the blue. So yeah. And so Dad, you want to mention some?
Well, I think so.
What are we seeing?
Yeah. So first of all, just from the movie perspective, we all looked at that zoom into the jungle and said, "What do we see? What do we see?" And I think we all agreed we see nothing. Right.
We see nothing.
Right. So that's the whole point. We see nothing, but he sees us.
Yeah.
So that's very much building the tension of the moment.
And we get that great sound effect where it's kind of like, whoosh, and like and it switches into this into the heat vision, and there's kind of a thumping in the background, like ka-dunk, 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 ka-dunk,
Yeah.
So you kind of realize all of a sudden that it's from some other perspective.
Yes.
Right. I think the audio spectrum goes much higher So whenever we're on the predator, and I think that's just a way to differentiate. I don't think it has any meaning for the vision in particular. But as far as
the thumping,
yeah,
the thumping sounds like a heartbeat. And are we hearing the viewers or the whoever's POV we're looking at from here's heartbeat, or are we hearing like the observed their heartbeat?
Yeah. Good
Perhaps.
question. I always thought it was the predator's heartbeat, like that we were now seeing it from his point of view, and so we were getting his heartbeat. But that's an interesting idea. Maybe it is. If he's picking up everything infrared, maybe he's also picking up audio, and he's hearing the hunted, their heartbeats. I don't know.
Yeah,
who knows?
prey.
Yeah, the prey. Yeah. But it's that's
a great question. I think looking ahead in the movie, kind of look for that and see if from when we're in Predator POV, are we hearing heartbeats? Is that something he's picking up also through his senses?
Yeah, we'll have to look for that in the future. But this is again, just like the minigun, we're seeing something iconic that this movie is known for, which is giving us a perspective we have not seen up till now. You might have seen a little bit of night vision or infrared in previous movies, maybe some more movies, but talking about a antagonist, the other, right? Another horror entity where you are seeing from their perspective, but it is completely altered. I don't know if this is new here. I was racking my brain trying to come up with other,
I think it
POVs.
is new, John. It's definitely military technology. Now, when you look at the scene, when it switches to the predator vision, you immediately think thermal vision.
Yes.
And thermal vision in 1986 was the movie filmed. Yeah, so in 1986, that would have been very unusual commercial technology. Would have been very much brand new technology. The kind of the history of night vision and thermal vision is mostly a military history. The night vision technology was some of the fundamental technologies on it go back to around the early 1900s, but it really wasn't developed until World War II. And night vision technology was simply the amplification of existing light. So that's not what we're seeing here, because clearly it isn't dark outside, and we're not amplifying stray starlight.
Right.
If it had been that, what we would be seeing would be instead of a black and white image, we'd be seeing the green screen image, which is characteristic of that. Mm-hmm. And the military settled early on green screens because that's where the human eye is most sensitive. And so if you're going to amplify stray light into an image, you're going to want to present it in a way that's easily seen. Green's also very restful to the eye, and so you don't get tired of looking in your headset at the green screen.
Right.
So in the early days, and in fact, much of the military technology was the night vision technology that we would have seen was a green screen. Not what we're seeing.
Which we saw in an earlier minute. I don't know if you remember the chopper ride
in the helicopter.
With
yes.
Long Tall Sally. They do give you like a little bit of a preview, like, hey, here's some altered vision, and you're like, okay, I'll discount that as military technology, like you're saying. But yeah, here we're seeing something that, right? I don't think a lot of people would have seen at this point. Like maybe you know what you're looking at because you're like, oh, like I can read a heat map or something like that. But I don't think we're used to seeing somebody seeing from that perspective, especially in right this kind of this genre twist of a movie.
So a couple of things about this. So it's not the low light or night vision that we're seeing.
Right.
what we're seeing instead is thermal vision.
Right.
So thermal vision is pretty common these days. Very commonly used now to point a thermal vision camera at a house to see where it's leaking energy. Mm-hmm. One of the early uses of it was in firefighting to find the hot spots in a fire through the smoke. And it wasn't. It was available to the military into the 1970s. It was finally declassified. The good stuff was declassified really not until the early 1990s.
Oh.
So what we're looking at is kind of a pretty early generation thermal vision system, and you can tell that by how few pixels there are in the bodies that it's sensing down below in the jungle.
Yeah.
You're not seeing faces.
No.
If you had to guess what the pixel density or the ability to differentiate temperatures on this, it's pretty light discrimination. Mm-hmm. It's not very accurate.
So that's interesting because I was reading John's research, because we all know that I don't do research.
You're reading something I put on.
I'm reading John's notes, and the production behind doing the heat vision sounds super complicated, because they were using a heat vision camera, but the heat vision camera alone was not giving them the image that they wanted. Apparently, you couldn't see any of the jungle in the background.
Correct, because the jungle's all the same temperature.
So it was giving them a really washed out picture. You couldn't differentiate anything that was happening.
Right. So that's another point that I would make. When you first see that, you think first generation thermal image, and then you think, well, how am I able to see all of the leaves?
Hey, yeah.
And the answer is, Jeff, exactly what you mentioned, is that we're seeing the leaves because they're combining the images from a regular camera and a thermal camera.
Now it's making sense. God, I was reading all these notes from the VFX blog. Joel Hynek, who worked on the movie, gave a very, very technical explanation, and then he gave some anecdotes. But yeah, just like, I'll copy and paste that because I don't understand any of it, and I'll lean on Dad because my dad has worked with the thermal cameras.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, well, all they did is they put an optical device called a beam splitter in the camera lens, and that sent half of the light to a conventional camera and half of the light to the thermal camera. And then it's simply a matter of you mount those two cameras on the same rail and you adjust them in very fine detail so that when you recombine the images, you're able to have them perfectly.
So one layer
overlaid.
It would be the jungle background or whatever the regular camera picks up, and then you overlay the heat camera image on top of that.
Yeah, this really blurry heat camera image sounds like.
Yeah, and they may well have been doing in the 1980s. They were probably still using an imaging tube, an old scanning tube device that was common in both television cameras and television displays, probably in the 60s and into the early 70s. And that's probably what they were still using in the civilian technology for thermal imaging.
Yeah.
So the conventional camera picks up the jungle. This first generation thermal camera picks up the low resolution images of the people.
Wow, that's fascinating. Wow. Okay.
So
makes a lot more sense.
The other thing is the what is it that's low in resolution? It's the temperature difference that you're picking up, and so it's like looking at shades of a color difference, you're only able to tell a handful of colors or a handful of temperatures.
Sure.
And so that's why the people look so blocky.
Right.
It's not that it's pixelated in that sense of having low spatial resolution. It just has low thermal resolution.
And you mentioned, Dad, this idea, or you mentioned that the possible problem of having a jungle setting as what you're trying to film these people against and trying to pick the people out. The technical advisor here, Joel Hynek, who I talked about just briefly before, gives this anecdote of looking at what temperature they would actually lose the resolution, and that the people just kind of blend into the jungle temperature. And he said that was about 94 degrees. So what they had to do is they did have to haul in these water trucks and spray down the jungle, spray down the trees, the bushes, the ground, so that you're actually having that contrast. Otherwise, you don't have it. And he said the first time they sprayed the jungle, it didn't work because he realized that these water trucks had been sitting in the sun and they're just spraying hot water, which made no difference. And so they literally had to truck in ice water to spray down the jungle just for like these few seconds of scenes. Just imagine the production design that goes into that. I love that. I love the little details that he's bringing.
Commitment to getting these shots. Like they definitely realized this was an important part of the film. This is what was going to make it different than other films that were like it, you know. And
well, don't you just love, just kind of in general, the introduction of some technical thing? The kind of it's the idea of it that makes the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I think of the different Star Trek series, and they introduced the transporter and the warp drive and the holodeck, and data and all of those things. So some of them were plot devices. I guess I had heard that the transporter was just a plot device. We need to get all the people from here to there and not waste any time.
Right. And then make it not work when they're underground or just inconvenient to the plot. Like, no. There's a whole podcast for that. Don't worry.
But there's some things like, what was the automated doctor? The robotic doctor guy.
On Star Trek?
On Star Trek.
Which one?
Not in the original one, but in the one nobody sees.
Wait, is it the hologram doctor?
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know. I only know the Next Generation myself.
Yeah. Anyway, skipping over all of that, fix this in post.
Will do.
There are ideas like the holodeck that just kind of grab you, and I think the notion of a creature that senses the world differently, but in a way that's kind of familiar. This thermal vision is starting to come into our world. Mm-hmm. It's still not a common thing here 30 years later.
I agree completely. Going back again to my horror sensibilities, you've got a first person POV shot right here of the killer, reminiscent of say Halloween or Friday the 13th or any of the knockoff slashers from the 1980s that came before the Predator. And here we kind of get the Predator is our slasher, and we get their POV shot, but we get this brand new, really never seen before perspective where, okay, so there's something a little different about this. And that just adds a really great element and a little bit of a surprise. And really, the first time you see this, you got to perk up in your seat when this comes about. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like the minigun. Like I was saying, it's a game changer. It's iconic, especially in the sense that if I see thermal imaging nowadays, I instantly think, Predator vision. I'm sure that's like a common connection that people make nowadays. Like 31 years later, people still see thermal pictures and say, "Oh, it's just like the Predator." Like just like that minigun, just like Old Painless.
So you mentioned a couple of practical problems they had in the jungle. John, you've walked into my garage and I have an infrared sensor light in the garage that lights things up for you when you walk in there. Right. You walk in there in this time of year, the light comes on instantly. Mm-hmm. You walk in there in the summer and you might have to take off your hat and point your bald head at it. And because of exactly this problem, if it's 95 degrees in the garage, it can't tell the difference between me and the rest of the garage.
Oh man, have you guys seen the movie Sneakers?
It's been forever, so I'm just gonna say no.
With Robert Redford? No.
Yes,
it's been a while.
So, Bill, your description of your garage reminds me of one of the climactic scene in the movie Sneakers, which is a movie I love, where he's trying to break into a building and
they turn the heat up.
Yeah, the alarm is based on sensing heat in the room, so they turn the heat up to 98 degrees so that when he jumps in there, his body temperature matches the temperature of the room.
Oh my gosh!
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. The other thing about the technology we use today is that it's based on rate of change, not absolute temperature.
Oh, calculus.
And so, so if you put yourself in a
bunch of nerds.
If you creep across my garage, even in the winter, you can creep across it in the dark and not get the light to turn on.
So I can steal your black book from the. Whatever it was.
that picture book of John's baby pictures.
Oh no.
That's right.
Nobody wants that. I want
it. The other thing about predator vision, if I could kind of finish off on that.
Yeah.
There's a kind of a biological question here of how is it exactly that he is able to do this biologically, and that remains a bit of a mystery. How this is conceivable. Biological heat sensors have to be cooled below the temperature of their surroundings, mm-hmm. or else they just get overwhelmed with the heat signature of the creature that has the heat sensors.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So in nature, you don't see heat sensors in what we call warm-blooded mammals. You see them in cold-blooded animals like snakes. Mm. And even in snakes, the classic example being the pit vipers like rattlesnakes that have heat sensors. They have them separate from their eyes out on their heads in a place where they can get those sensors out in the air and cooled off a bit.
Holy cow.
So it's a little bit unclear, and of course we don't need to explain it. He's an alien.
Is it conceivable if it's part of his helmet, part of his?
Yeah, I have to jump in as the nerd and say, yeah, Dad, sorry, but it's the helmet that has the heat vision. Once he removes it later in the movie, everything just kind of turns red. So he just has military grade technology in his helmet for aiming his shoulder cannon and for being able to pick out heat signatures.
So I think what happens when later in the movie, after he jumps in the waterfall and loses the helmet, mm-hmm. I think that, I guess my explanation for that is that he has the best biological heat-sensitive eyes, and the helmet is just matching the scene to what his eyes are capable of seeing.
Interesting.
Well, he doesn't lose the helmet till much later, and he does it voluntarily just to clear up some plot points. He does come out of his active camouflage when he jumps in the water after Arnold. And when Arnold is covered in mud, he still has the helmet on. He doesn't take the helmet off until he's going mano-a-mano with Arnold a lot later. And he's just beating Arnold in the face. And for whatever reason, he takes off the helmet. And I don't think it's really explained why. Must explain it. I agree. This is something we have to explain it. Like, who else is going to be explaining it?
Revenge of the Nerds.
A bunch of nerds.
Nerds.
Yep. Okay, so continue with your take, Dad.
Yeah, no, I think it's much the same thing that the sunglasses do for us on a bright day. It just converts what's really out there into something that is a little more compatible with our biology.
Okay, so my theory then on that is like the jungle is really hot, but for some reason his helmet is able to differentiate the jungle no, jungle's all organic. I don't know. I was thinking to explain, like, that would explain it, but no, maybe it's just something about life forms that he's able to pick up versus platforms.
I
don't know.
I think he's got a beam splitter in his helmet.
Oh, that's it. Just not mud. Mud is his. Yeah.
All right. So
Achilles heel.
that kind of brings us past the heat vision.
Holy cow! That was so wonderful. Thank you, Dad, for bringing the heat vision talk. I was like, this is the perfect guest. This is awesome. This is awesome.
Yeah, Bill, that was awesome. Good insight on the heat vision.
Yeah. So
and the camera work, I find that part fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, in more ways than one, the camera work. Like, right, John McTiernan is like for his effort here in this movie. It's just insane because he's working with all these moving pieces. Like, he's not just filming, the actors on screen. He's also taking into account this other entity, this other point of view, what their enemy is seeing. And not only that, but how they're seeing their prey. Just so many moving pieces that I feel like nailed in this movie.
Well, that kind of closes out the minute because in the last, 10 seconds, it switches back to, regular view. And we just get a shot of the guys just kind of like running through the jungle real quick.
Yep.
And that's about it. Not much else happens there.
Yeah, I agree. There's not a whole lot else going on in the minute.
It's essentially a recreation of what we saw heat vision just now in regular vision. Just seeing them kind of run through the...
Yeah. Oh, last little connection. So every episode or so, I try to reference this field manual for the Army, Jungle Operations, written in 1982. Oh, yes. And they're mentioning some of their military-grade technology. And on page 5-4, the quote is, Surveillance, target acquisition, and night observation, otherwise known as Stano, devices, especially infrared, starlight scopes, and unattended ground sensors are quite effective in gathering information about troop movements in the jungle. Radars and photography are not as effective because of the concealment of the foliage. And that's something I'm going to keep going back to again and again, because in the original script it talks about the Predator having this altered vision, this altered point of view. And I just had this hunch that the screenwriters had this in their laps, this field manual, as they're writing the script, because I feel like so many things for Army operations and Army tactics and the tactics used by all three sides we see in the movie are taken from this.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Gosh, anything else?
I was going to add something there, and I got nothing. You covered it. You got it.
Yeah. So, Dad, I have to ask. Like, you sound like you know a lot about thermal cameras. Do you have experience working with thermal cameras? Is it anything like Predator vision?
So, the most relevant experience that I could speak to that is kind of easy to understand in the early 90s, I worked with a camera company that developed a camera that could see inside of a particular combustion process in cement plants called a lime kiln, or the cement kiln rather, in the cement plant. And they had an opportunity to save millions of dollars and solve an environmental problem by burning tires that had been thrown in the landfill in the cement kiln. And the EPA allowed them to do this, provided they could certify that the temperatures in the cement kiln were the right temperature. Mm-hmm. And so we
did it have to be hot enough to burn it to a point where it wouldn't send up too much pollution? Is that the idea?
Right. And like an automobile engine, you don't want it too hot because you produce nitrous oxides. You don't want it too cool because it's incomplete combustion and doesn't make the cement quality that you want.
Oh, interesting.
So these cameras, you had to be able to visually see the combustion zone, and you had to be able to accurately measure temperature in the combustion zone. And once this camera was developed and deployed, then the EPA gave approval to burn millions of these tires in cement plants around the country.
Burn those tires.
That's what happens to them now, instead of just collecting in the dump.
Light the tires.
And so that device was pretty early in technology development, and the expensive part was the sensors that could accurately measure temperature. Those were infrared sensors. Mm-hmm. So to keep things simple, they had a a beam splitter in front of a high resolution camera that the operators could use to see into the kiln. And on the other side of the beam splitter was a temperature sensor that could accurately measure the temperature in the combustion zone where the tires were actually burning.
Wow,
So,
it's almost like the EPA was using scientific research to make smart decisions about the health of our planet.
well, I read that the EPA administrator was a big Predator fan. So that's,
Well, it's just such a contrast to our current EPA that my mind is I forget that things were normal a couple of years ago.
Dad's at the plant, just going, "Oh, why don't you call in, the normal engineers? What do you need us for?" And you hear some voice, "Because some damn fool accused you of being the best." You son of a bitch. That sounds like my dad.
it brings me, John. You can since you probably watched Predator on the sly when I was out of the house
I did.
back in the day,
At Tyler's house.
I got a big kick out of a comment I saw from a Predator fan. He said that he watched it with his uncle. His uncle let him watch it when his dad wouldn't. And the uncle sat calmly through all the scenes of gore and mayhem.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever an F-bomb was dropped, he would start singing. Don't listen to that, boys. We don't care how many people we kill and gut.
Right. Skin alive. And yeah.
Don't say the F word. So I had to laugh. It sounded a bit like me.
Yeah. Don't watch the kissing, but check out this explosion.
That's right.
Yeah. No, you're taking us to all the good movies back in the day. I remember like the Return of the Jedi and James Bond. And, Indiana Jones, all that good stuff. Gosh, we have anything else we have?
After we cut it off to go to post, I'll tell you a funny James Bond story.
Yeah, I think I know the one you mean.
That I won't tell it.
No. You could tell it. It might be a new one. There's probably some new stories out there. Gosh, I don't know if there's anything else. The only last things I have written here is the note that it's Chekhov's minigun. So we see it here in the first act. We're hopefully going to see it fired in the third act, if not the second act.
I think we might.
If not earlier. I think we might. And it's also this is an all-team minute, so we see all the team members either speaking or moving around the jungle. It's not a lot of minutes that we've had that. We've had maybe a handful, but
nice. I didn't even realize that when I watched it. Nice.
Yeah. I mean, you see people just kind of moving quickly through the jungle in terms of the non-speakers, but it's neat to see the whole gang is here. And gosh,
did we reach the end of the minute?
I think we've reached the whole recommend section of the podcast. So Dad, this is the place where we normally ask the guest and each other, what's something good that you've been seeing or reading or listening to. So if you want to start off as being the guest, something that you'd recommend for our esteemed good-looking audience.
Mm-hmm. Good looking.
Yeah, there you go.
You one ugly mother.
I'm working my way through Philip K. Dick's what is it, Electric Lights? No, Electric Dreams.
Oh, on Amazon?
And on Amazon, and there is a one in particular that I'm really excited about, the Autocon episode, because the lead character is named Zabriskie.
No.
And
that's awesome.
Yeah, love it. Go see it.
Okay.
Wait, I thought. Okay, so it's not the actor, but it's the character.
It's the character.
Oh my gosh, is that Emily Zabriskie, played by
that's the one.
Juno Temple. What has there ever been a Zabriskie actor? I mean, a Zabriskie character. I know there's been Grace Zabriskie, who is in a bunch of movies, but I don't know if there's ever been.
Are you saying that no one came up when you Googled yourself, John?
That's true. Every day when I Google myself, it's
just Just a bunch of spam ads. Damn it.
Just spam. That sounds like me.
Would
I do
you
a lot
like to
of.
build a website, John Zabriskie?
This one's not taken either. Like none of your name is taken. Like, oh, that's so sad. Oh man,
I've been Electric Dreams has been sitting. It always pops up as a recommended show for me on Amazon, so I'll have to check that out.
Yeah,
and look,
I'm gonna have to check
the
out
Zabriskie character. Yeah,
AutoFac.
Yeah, Autocon or Auto. What is it? AutoFac.
AutoFac.
All right.
Yeah, AutoFac. I think it's episode 8.
Short for Automatic Factory.
Oh, okay.
Nerds.
I've just got one recommend this week. Last week I went a little overboard with 3 recommends.
That was great. No, I love all the recommends. It's a little movie. It takes place in the Iraqi desert with George Clooney.
And after that, there's another movie about 2 cops. One's named Tango. The other is named Cash.
Cash. Tango and Cash. Cash and Tango.
Tango and Cash.
So George Clooney's Aunt Rosemary is in White Christmas. And
what?
Yeah.
That's how he got in then. He's just had a relative who was a big movie star.
All right. Besides 3 Kings and Tango and Cash, which everyone should obviously go see.
Right.
I saw one. I was only able to see one movie this week because of the holidays. I was very busy. But of course, it's a horror movie because this is what I do. Of
course.
Yeah, I checked out a movie recently released on VOD, and it's called Hellfest.
Mm-hmm.
Hellfest, and it's pretty great. It's
a family movie, Jeff.
It's a family movie. Yeah. Gather the kids around, children. We're gonna go to Hellfest. Hellfest is a modern slasher. And that's kind of why I liked it. I have an affinity for your classic 80s slasher. I love the Friday the 13th movies, Halloween. I love all the shitty knockoffs that came out in the 80s that were also slashers. They're just like popcorn comfort food to me for horror movies. But this is like I said, like a modern.
You just talking about this has got me looking over my shoulder here. Hopefully the power doesn't go out.
So Hellfest is just about it's the classic story about 4 teenagers that go to a kind of a haunted house festival, and within that haunted house festival, there's a killer that stalks them throughout. And it was pretty great. It's just a kind of a straightforward slasher. It's got some good kill scenes, some good gore gags, if you will, great special effects, and I enjoyed it. It was 90 minutes and kind of perfect if that's what you're looking for.
Awesome. Where do you find that? You said
it's just for rent right now, like VOD. So you can rent it on iTunes, Amazon Prime, or Amazon, whatever.
Sweet.
And I should mention that AutoFac is my favorite genre, which is post-apocalyptic, but with a big twist.
There wasn't a twist enough that the world had ended.
I do love a good
more.
post-apocalyptic story. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, I'm a sucker.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was going to mention Bird Box as kind of a recommend, but honestly, I just skipped through it. I probably watched about 15 total minutes of that movie.
Really? I haven't.
So that's
wanting to watch it. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say let it breathe and give it a chance, but I just didn't really have time lately. So I saw Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse as promised last episode. I saw that with Mike Fleming. Really, really, really enjoyed it. There's just wonderful artistic style, and the voice acting is top notch. It has a really good emotional core. So I don't want to say too much about like the plot or anything like that, but it has, there's some good emotions at the core of it, and that are driving the characters. Just the variety of the different Spider-Man, as promised in the title and in the trailers, just really lends for all kinds of antics and I don't know, good crossover potential.
Yeah,
probably,
I've heard really
for the
good
future.
things.
But yeah, I would totally recommend it. I love the music. I love just about everything about that movie. The art style, the shoes he's wearing kind of drove me to buy some Air Jordan ones. Yes. The low top versions, not the high top, because I'm not much of a high top wearer. But yeah, I just really enjoyed it. Anyway, so this is the part of the show where we say, where do we find people? So, Dad, you being the guest, where can people find you online? What kind of things that you have?
Now, Bill, be careful, because as soon as you say where you can find yourself, you're going to get flooded with Predator Minute listeners. Just warning you.
Yeah, so I'm widely available as Carl_Hungus.
Oh no, you too?
only mine has a C, not a K.
Oh,
my name is College Expert.
That's where all my followers have gone. I went to the wrong address.
That's where they're going.
Otherwise, I hang out on LinkedIn. where I'm Carl Space Hungus.
My name is College Expert.
This is the best part of the podcast.
Oh no, Carl Hungus.
Oh, well done. Well, everyone knows where they can find me. Just follow me or not.
My name is College Expert.
I need to look up, is there Carl Hungus on LinkedIn? Oh, there are several Carl Hunguses. Carl Hungai.
My name is College Expert.
Are they all porn stars?
Yep, one of them says Jackie Treehorn Productions. Another one says video producer. Yeah. So I think so. Oh, there's another Treehorn reference. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. My fantasy football name one year was Jackie Treehorn Productions.
How are you going to keep them down?
So yeah, not that, we'll cut that from the show. Thanks, Dan. And here's my address. Find me.
If you'd like to send John any notes about
it's a good thing I edit these and not you guys. So go ahead, listener, and email us your favorite iconic movie weapon and why.
This is the weapon of a Jedi Knight, not as clumsy or random as a blaster. An elegant weapon for a more civilized age.
Walter PPK, 7.65 mil with a delivery like a brick through a plate glass window.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Old Painless is waiting.
At predatorminute@gmail.com. We're available to respond to all your questions. They're just flying in, much like the Twitter followers of Jeff Carl Hungus. Yeah, I just can't keep right all those emails out of the inbox.
Blocking requests.
But you can also find us on Facebook and Twitter at Predator Minute, on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, all those podcatching apps. I don't think we have anything else. So for Predator Minute, I've been John Zabriskie.
I'm Jeff Glover.
Oh no!
Is Bill alive?
Oh no, he just dropped out. Oh my F. Until next time.
Stick around.
Oh no.
Who is your daddy and what does he do?